Hey, this is DJ.
This is Kaz. We're Buried Above Ground, and this is
Speak of the Devil podcast.
Greetings from Podcastville. It is December 12th, episode 32 of the Speak of the Devil podcast. So let's get right into it with, I guess, maybe an update. I know that I was trying to be more of a weekly schedule, but I had to travel to London for work, which was actually a really great experience. I wasn't sure if I was going to enjoy traveling abroad to London, but it was actually really great, and the team that I work for is wonderful out there, so it was actually a great experience, but also dealing at the same time and up until this week just some dental kind of issues, so haven't been real keen to get on the mic until now, but we're back. Like I said, here we go, going into Christmas. Couple cool little updates on some things. Happy to say that on that trip, the Nintendo Switch worked like a charm. It was very fun to play with. Got this actually little additional kind of little controller area for it, so people like big hands like me can actually play it and have fun with it. And this little guy, the Pocket Go, worked perfect. Enjoyed playing some of my classic Sega CD games on there. And as you can see, we have a new friend to the family here, the Positive Grid Bias Amp 2, which or Bias Head 2, which we will talk about here in a little bit. But talk about some music news. Metallica's Black Album, yes, Metallica, my favorite, has now spent more than 550 weeks on the Billboard 200 chart. According to Forbes, Metallica's self-titled 1991 album, often referred to as the Black Album, has now spent 550 non-consecutive weeks, or just over 10 and a half years, on the Billboard 200 chart. The LP is the first release in American history to hit the 550-week milestone. So there you go. Awesome for them. They've got those new tour dates coming next year, those concerts. The one in Columbus actually kind of intrigues me a little bit because the headliners, between the nights are, pretty good between them and everything. So maybe something like that, but I don't know. That's a lot. And we also have some news that Ghost mastermind Tobias Forge has confirmed to Finland's Chaos TV that he has commenced the songwriting process for the band's fifth album. He says, "I have been in the studio a couple days to record a few demos," he said in a new interview, and that January should be the official recording start of that. And kind of going along with that, Tobias Forge has actually been named Loudwire's Metal Artist of the Decade for the 2010s. In this edition of Loudwire Gear Factor, Ghost's leader Tobias Forge reflected on some of the music that gave him his start. So I guess if you go on Loudwire, you can read the full interview on that, but that's pretty interesting news. And then, yes, we move to the glorious Positive Grid Bias Head 2. It's a digital processor. It's got a power amp on it. All the kind of modern features that you would hope for. It can be controlled by app or actually by desktop. It's got, different topologies, everything. On here you can actually do in-face controls, or you can go to town. I mean, there's a wonderful community of Tone Cloud downloads that you can get from artists and members and everybody that have made their own amp matches, which is another nice feature on this. You can actually take a wave file from any guitar tone, sample it for 20 seconds. This thing will listen to that. It'll kind of create as close as it can. I mean, obviously it can't become something it's not, but it'll become, EQ wise as close as it is to basically any kind of guitar tone that you can, put into it. So it's great in that aspect. I love, all this kind of modern technology moving forward. I did get rid of a tube amp to get this, but in my experience with tube amps, I mean, it's like carrying around a computer with, tiny light bulbs in it, and the light bulbs are so precious and so careful that, most of the time, I guess if you're careful, they don't break and everything, but they need to be replaced. And I've had experiences with other tube amps where I've had to replace the tubes and they don't work and the whole amp is lost. And I've had the last amp where it's just WYSIWYG. It's what you see is what you get on the amp sections. And sometimes you take it to a gig or a rehearsal or something, and then something gets bumped, and all of a sudden the whole thing doesn't work, and you don't know what you're doing. These kind of things, they save your presets. Everything is the way you want it set every time. And they sound good. All these, I know there's tone purists out there and tube purists that have all these mega amps. And, a lot of times, depending on, where they're living, I mean, unless you live in a house or have like some kind of a rehearsal area, you're not going to be able to blare out these, 150 watt, super tube amps that need to be cranked to get the good sound. You can't do that. So a lot of times these amps, just like mine was, they just sit there because you never use them. These things, you can control them. You can put them on line outs. You can put them on headphones. You don't have to have it into an amp. You can have it into an amp. 600 watts of power. It's beautiful. So, I still have the Boss Katana, which is great because, this thing is very much just trying to be a perfect amp simulator. It doesn't have effects or anything like that. It's just trying to be hardcore amp modeling, matching. If you want to rehearse or maybe even play live, I think, maybe the Katana is still a good option because it does sound very good. But this thing, definitely sounds more authentic. It's got a little bit more processing power in it. And yeah, you know what? All these systems like the Axe and all that, they're all computers that in a few years they're going to be obsolete and you're going to have to buy new ones. But so what? That's the point. Why do you buy an iPhone every other year? Because you want the new technology. I don't want something that's been sitting there for 20 years. I don't want some Razor phone anymore. And I don't want a tube amp anymore. It's just not worth it. So this thing's the shit. Love it. I recommend if you can pick one up or any kind of the bias software, do yourself a favor. So, moving on to video games. Oh boy, I have really been enjoying, yet kind of also not so much enjoying aspects of Jedi Fallen Order for Xbox One. I think I have the ability to compare it to The Force Unleashed, which came out on 360, and then The Force Unleashed 2, which wasn't as good. But the first one really just, it like I said, it was The Force Unleashed. You would just run roughshod on every enemy, have a ton of powers. I mean, bringing down, starfighters, like I said in a couple other podcasts. I mean, you really had a sense of power. And, in this game, Cal, the protagonist, I mean, you understand, he's, on the run and he didn't have a chance to fully develop his skills. He's not this clone of, that Vader created or whatever. But I don't know. I think the story is pretty good. I do like how they develop it. I like that, they tie it into, the Saw Gerrera a little bit. And I think it's the actual voice actor that's from the movie that does it. Unless if it's not, it's an uncanny resemblance. But the thing that I don't like about it is like the Angry Video Game Nerd says on a lot of his reviews, it's one of those where the fuck do I go kind of games. It's like, and you're like almost like a Castlevania or something where you're having to go back and retread old levels once you get new abilities that let you go back into that. And I'm not a huge fan of retreading levels anyway. But then there's a lot of puzzle aspects. There's a lot of winding roads and everything. And it's sometimes it's just hard to follow. You can't set waypoints which would be nice. So like if you could, and there's no way to kind of really know. There's just a general direction on the holo map, and that's my biggest complaint. I really do like it, but that, and I guess a side complaint is sometimes the combat just feels like you can really get destroyed really quickly. It can go one way or the other, and maybe that's how it's supposed to be, but I mean, a normal stormtrooper, if you're not paying attention, can definitely take you out. You're not all powerful, all invincible. Your force powers are very weak. You know, you can stun somebody for like half a second, but once you start hitting them, it's done, and he's not that powerful, and I guess that's the point. I'm probably about halfway through it, so you know, story-wise, I'm sure I'm still gonna love it, but some of the mechanics, and especially the navigation, are starting to grind on me a little bit. So even before I would finish it, I would probably say, you know, this will probably end up at least an 8 or a 9 out of 10, but I would still put the original Force Unleashed at probably like a 9.5, just because it really delivered on what it promised, and just more action. You know, it was more like God of War, you know, kind of feel. But, you know, that's just an opinion. And and then one of the other games that I talked about a couple podcasts ago that I wasn't sure how it was going to go, but I guess we know is Death Stranding. I guess the Kojima production has not really bared a lot of fruit, and it's been doing actually pretty bad in sales. But, you know, I guess that it's just kind of too much of a weird game where you don't really, you're just kind of walking around. So I guess that's all to be said about that. It's just bad sales. What are we watching over here? What is he looking at? I think he's looking at, oh yeah, he's looking at the same thing. All right. Our old man Fluff from Dragged Under now, who introed this podcast one time when he was in, was it Rest Repose still? I think so, yeah. Anyways, on to wrestling. So WWE is definitely making a comeback, a fire back onto the whole war. Probably the biggest announcement that anybody could, you know, think that wasn't kind of a super secret, but CM Punk is back. You know, he hasn't really announced when he's going to wrestle. I'm sure he's going to be at WrestleMania. Seth Rollins, Daniel Bryan. It doesn't really matter who he fights. I mean, he's CM Punk. He's been gone long enough. He's got enough heat. He's going to bring a lot of eyeballs, you know, to the broadcast. So I've always been a CM Punk fan, you know, especially once after the big pipe bomb promo. Yeah, I think that's what really hooked me and a lot of people. Great champion, you know, it's too bad that he left, but it's great to see him back. And then another person that's back, John Morrison, which, you know, a great athlete, you know, he's a pretty good promo guy. I mean, he's certainly not a CM Punk, but he's a great worker. He's somebody that is a great wrestler. He's a very good technician. He'll be in there. He can entertain the crowd. He can entertain everybody. So he's back. And then, you know, now we got, it's a little bit old news now because it's been out for a while, but Bray Wyatt now has his own hurt and heel Fiend Universal belt that I think, they haven't done it yet, but I think the idea is that because, like, the last time he came out, he was wearing the belt around his head, and I think he's going to try to do that again and kind of, like, circumpose that to be, like, his mask, maybe. So we'll see. I guess you can buy one for, like, I think they're like $6,000. So if you want to buy one on the WWE shop, they are on sale. And I guess last is just kind of AEW versus NXT. You know, like I said, WWE is stepping it up on kind of the main programming. But I don't know. I feel kind of like, and maybe that's why it is what it is, but NXT on Wednesdays, to me, just doesn't feel as interesting to watch as AEW. AEW is very, you know, much kind of a Monday Night Feel show, and I know that's why they're doing it on Wednesday, because they don't want to compete, but even though they are. But I still like the way that AEW is progressing. You know, again, I love Jim Ross and Tony Schiavone as the announcers. And, you know, Chris Jericho kind of doing the Inner Circle, which is kind of reminiscent of the NWO and all that kind of stuff. But that's fine. That's fine. But it is interesting that last night he tried to invite John Moxley into it. We'll see how that goes, if they're going to really expand this thing, the Inner Circle, to really feel like that old NWO kind of feel. Who knows? But we'll see how it all plays out. But for tonight, looks like that is it for us. So we will probably be back one or two more times before Christmas. So I guess we will wish all of you a pleasant evening.